This is Pie, and I'm just going to whisper and soft speak it, if my voice will allow me to tonight. So sit back. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for coming to my channel if it's your first time. I appreciate everybody. Thank you so much. Please like and subscribe if this is the kind of content that you do like to listen to. So, what does Charolette say about writing the yellow wallpaper? Many a reader have asked that. When the first story came out in New England magazine about 1991, a Boston physician made protest in the transcript. Such a story ought not to be written, he said. It was enough to drive anyone mad to read it. Another physician in Kansas, I think, wrote to say that it was the best description of incipient insanity he had ever seen, and begging my pardon, had I been there? Now the story is this. For many years I suffered from severe and continuous nervous breakdown, tending to melancholia and beyond. During about the third year of this trouble, I went in devout faith and some faint stir of hope to a note specialist in nervous diseases, the best known in the country. This wise man put me to bed and applied the rest cure, to which a still good physique responded so promptly that he concluded there was nothing much the matter with me, and sent me home with solemn advice to live as domestic a life as far as possible, to have but 2 hours intellectual life a day, and never to touch pen, brush, or pencil again, as long as I lived. This was in 1887. I went home and obeyed those directions for some 3 months, and came so near the borderline of utter mental ruin that I could see over. Then, using the remnants of intelligence that remained, and helped by a wise friend, I cast the noted specialist's advice to the winds, and went to work again. Work, the normal life of every human being, work in which is joy and growth and service, without which one is a pauper and a parasite, ultimately recovering from some measure of power. Being naturally moved to rejoicing by this narrow escape, that is when I wrote the yellow wallpaper. With this embellishments and additions to carry out the ideal, I never had hallucinations or objections to my mural decorations, and sent a copy to the physician who so nearly drove me mad. He never acknowledged it. The little book is valued by alienists and as a good specimen of one-of-a-kind literature. It has, to my knowledge, saved one woman from a similar fate, so terrifying her family that they let her out into normal activity as she recovered. But the best result is this. Many years later, I was told that the great specialist had admitted to friends of his that he had altered his treatment of neurasthenia since reading the yellow wallpaper. It was not intended to drive people crazy, but to save people from being driven crazy, and it worked. This article was written by Charolette Perkins Gilman, originally appeared October 1913, issue of The Forerunner. Here it is. It is the yellow wallpaper by Charolette Perkins Gilman. I am sitting by the window now, up in this atrocious nursery. The yellow wallpaper. It is very seldom that mere ordinary people like John and myself secure ancestral halls for the summer. A colonial mansion, a hereditary estate, I would say a haunted house, and a reach the height of romantic felicity. But that would be asking too much of fate. Still, I will proudly declare that there is something queer about it. Else why should it be let so cheaply? And why have stood so long untenanted? John laughs at me, of course, but one expects that in a marriage. John is practical in the extreme. He has no patience with faith and intense horror of superstition, and he scoffs it openly at any talk of things not to be felt and seen and put down in figures. John is a physician, and perhaps I would not say it to a living soul, of course, but this is a dead paper and a great relief to my mind. Perhaps that it is one reason I do not get well faster. You see, he does not believe I am sick. What can I do? And what can one do if a physician of high standing and one's own husband assures friends and relatives that there is really nothing the matter with one but temporary nervous depression and a slight hysterical tendency? What is one to do? My brother is also a physician, also of high standings, and he said the same thing. So I take phosphates or phosphites, whichever it is, and tonics, and journeys, and air, and exercise, and I am absolutely forbidden to work until I'm well. Personally, I disagree with their ideas. Personally, I believe that congenial work with excitement and change would do me good. But what is one to do? I did write for a while, in spite of them, but it does exhaust me a good deal, having to be so sly about it, or else meet with heavy opposition. I sometimes fancy that my condition, if I had less opposition and more society and stimulus. But John says the very worst thing I can do is to think about my condition, and I confess it always makes me feel bad. So I will let it alone and talk about the house, the most beautiful place. It is quite alone, standing well back from the road, quite 3 miles from the village. It makes me think of the English place that you read about, for there are hedges and walls and gates that lock, and lots of separate little houses for the gardeners and people. There is a delicious garden. I never saw such a garden. Large and shady, full of border paths, and lined with long grape-covered arbors with seats under them. There were greenhouses too, but they are all broken now. There was some legal trouble, I believe, something about their heirs and co-heirs. About anyhow, the place has been empty for years. That spoils my ghostliness. I'm afraid, but I don't care. There is something strange about the house. I can feel it. I even said so to John one moonlit evening, but he said what I felt was a draught and shut the window. I get unreasonably angry with John sometimes. I'm sure I never used to be so sensitive. I think it is due to this nervous condition. But John says if I feel so, I shall neglect proper self-control. So I take pains to control myself before him at least, and that makes me very tired. I don't like her room a bit. I wanted one downstairs that opened on the piazza and had roses all over the window and such pretty old-fashioned chintz hangings. But John would not hear of it. He said that there was only one window and not room for 2 beds, and no near room for him if he took another. He is very careful and loving and hardly lets me stir without special direction. I've had a scheduled prescription for each hour in the day. He takes all care for me, and so I feel basely ungrateful not to value it more. He said we came here solely on my account, that I was to have perfect rest and all the air I could get. Your exercise depends on your strength, my dear, he said, and your food somewhat on your appetite, but air you can absorb all the time. So we took the nursery at the top of the house. It is a big, airy room, the whole floor nearly with windows that look always, and air and sunshine galore. It was nursery first, and then playroom and gymnasium. I should judge, for the windows are barred for little children, and there are rings and things in the walls. The paint and the paper look as if a boys' school had used it. It is stripped off the paper in great patches all around the head of my bed, about as far as I can reach. And in a great place on the other side of the room, low down, I never saw worse paper in my life. One of those sprawling, flamboyant patterns committing every artistic sin. It is dull enough to confuse the eye and following, pronounced enough to constantly irritate and provoke study. When you follow the lame, uncertain curves for a little distance, they suddenly commit suicide, plunge off at an outrageous angles, destroy themselves in unheard of contradictions. The color is repellent, almost revolting, a smoldering, unclean yellow, strangely faded by the slow turning sunlight. It is a dull yet lurid orange in some places, a sickly sulphur tint in others. No wonder children hate it. I should hate it myself if I had to live in this room long. Oh, there comes John, and I must put this away. He hates to have me write a word. We have been here 2 weeks, and I haven't felt like writing before since that first day. I'm sitting by the window now, in this atrocious nursery, and there's nothing to hinder my writing as much as I please, save a lack of strength. John is away all day, and even some nights when his cases are serious. And I'm glad my case is not serious. But these nervous troubles are dreadfully depressing. John does not know how much I really suffer. He knows there is no reason to suffer, and that suffices him. Of course, it is only nervousness. It does weigh on me so not to do my duty in any way. I meant to be such a help to John, such a real rest and comfort. And yet here I am, comparative burden already. Nobody would believe what an effort is to do what little I am able to dress and entertain and other things. It is fortunate Mary is so good with the baby. Such a dear baby. And yet I cannot be with him. It makes me so nervous. I suppose John never was nervous in his life. He laughs at me so about this wallpaper. At first he meant to repaper the room, but afterwards he said that I was letting it get the better of me, and that nothing was worse for a nervous patient than to give way to such fancies. He said that after all, the wallpaper was changed. It would be the heavy bedstead, and then the barred windows, and then the gate at the head of the stairs, and so on. You know, the place is doing you good, he said. And really, dear, I don't care to renovate the house just for 3 months' rental. Then do let us go downstairs, I said. There are such pretty rooms there. Then he took me in his arms and called me a blessed little goose, and he said we would go down to the cellar if I wished, and have it whitewashed into the bargain. But he is right enough about the beds and the windows and things. It is an airy and comfortable room, as anyone need wish, and, of course, I would not be so silly to make him uncomfortable just for a whim. I'm really getting quite fond of the big room, all but that horrid paper. Out of one window I can see the garden, those mysterious deep-shaded arbors, the righteous old-fashioned flowers, and bushes and gnarly trees. Out of another I get a lovely view of the bay and a little private wharf belonging to the estate. There is a beautiful shaded lane that runs down here from the house. I always fancy I see people walking in these numerous paths and arbors, but John has cautioned me not to give way to fancy in the least. He says that with my imagination and imaginative power and habit of story-making, a nervous weakness like mine is sure to lead to all manner of excited fancies, and that I ought to use my will and good sense to check the tendencies. So I try. I think sometimes that if I were the only well enough to write a little, I would relieve the press of ideas and rest of me. But I find I get pretty tired when I try. It is so discouraging not to have any advice and companionship about my work. When I get really well, John says, we will ask Cousin Henry and Julia down for a long visit. But he says he would as soon put fireworks in my pillowcase as to let me have those stimulating people around now. I wish I could get well faster. But I must not think about that. This paper looks to me as if it knew what a vicious influence it had. There is a recurrent spot where the pattern lolls like a broken neck and 2 bulbous eyes stared at you upside down. I get positively angry with the impertinence of it and the everlastingness. Up and down and sideways they crawl, and those absurd unblinking eyes are everywhere. There is one place where 2 breasts didn't match, and the eyes go all up and down, the line one a little higher than the other. I never saw so much expression in an inanimate thing before. And we all know how much expression they have. I used to lie awake as a child and get more entertainment and terror out of blank walls and plain furniture than most children could find in a toy store. I remember what a kindly wink the knobs of our big old bureau used to have, and there was one chair that always seemed like a strong friend. I used to feel that if any of the other things looked too fierce, I could always hop into the chair and be safe. The furniture in this room is no worse than inharmonious, however, for we had to bring it all from downstairs. I suppose when this was used as a playroom, they had to take the nursery things out, and no wonder. I never saw such ravages as the children have made here. The wallpaper, as I said before, is torn off in spots and in strict closer than a brother. They must have had perseverance as well as hatred. Then the floor is scratched and gouged and splintered, and the plaster itself is dug out here and there. And this great heavy bed, which is all we found in the room, looks as if it had been through the wars. But I don't mind it a bit. Only the paper. There comes John's sister, such a dear girl as she is, and so careful of me. I must not let her find me writing. She is a perfect and enthusiastic housekeeper, and hopes for no better profession. I verily believe she thinks it is the writing which makes me sick. But I can write when she is out and see her a long way off from these windows. There is one that commands the road, a lovely shaded winding road, and one that just looks off over the country. A lovely country too, full of great elms and velvet meadows. This wallpaper has a kind of sub-pattern in a different shade, particularly irritating one, for you can only see it in certain lights and not clearly then. But in the places where it isn't faded, and where the sun is just so, I can see a strange, provoking, formless sort of figure that seems to skulk about behind that silly and conspicuous front design. Their sisters on the stairs. Well, the 4th of July is over. The people are gone and I'm tired out. John thought it might be good for me to have a little company, so we had Mother and Nellie and the children down for a week. Of course, I didn't do a thing. Jenny sees to everything now, but it tired me all the same. John says if I don't pick up faster, he shall send me to Wire Mitchell in the fall. But I don't want to go there at all. I had a friend who was in his hands once, and she said he is like John and my brother, only more so. Besides, it is such an undertaking to go so far. I don't feel as if it was worth while to turn my hand over for anything, and I'm getting dreadfully fretful and querulous. I cry at nothing and cry most of the time. Of course I don't when John is here or anybody else, but when I'm alone. And I am alone a good deal just now. John is kept in town very often by serious cases, and Jenny is good and lets me alone when I want her to. So I walk a little in the garden or down that lovely lane, sit on the porch under the roses, and lie down up here a good deal. I'm getting very fond of the room in spite of the wallpaper. Maybe it's perhaps because of the wallpaper. It dwells in my mind so. I lie here on this great immovable bed. It is nailed down, I believe, and follow that pattern about by the hour. It is as good as gymnastics, I assure you. I shall, we'll say, at the bottom down in the corner over there where it has not been touched, and I determined for the 1,000th time that I will follow that pointless pattern to some sort of conclusion. I know a little of the principle of design, and I know this thing was not arranged on any laws of radiation or alteration or repetition or symmetry or anything else that I have ever heard of. It is repeated, of course, by the breaths, but not otherwise. Looked at it in one way, each breath stands alone. The bloated curves and flourishes, a kind of debased Romanesque, with delirium tremens, go waddling up and down in isolated columns of fatuity. but on the other hand, they connect diagonally, and the sprawling outlines run off in great slanting waves of optic horror, like a lot of wallowing seaweeds in full chase. The whole thing goes horizontally, too. At least it seems so. And I exhaust myself in trying to disguise the order of its going in that direction. They have used a horizontal breadth for frenzy, and that adds wonderfully to the confusion. There is at one end of the room where it is almost intact, and there, when the cross lights fade and the low sun shines directly upon it, I can almost fancy radiation after all. The interminable grotesques seem to form around a common center and rush off in headlong plunges of equal distraction. It makes me so tired to follow it. I will take a nap, I guess. I don't know why I should write this. I don't want to. I don't feel able. And I know John would think it was absurd. But I must say what I feel and think in some way. It is such a relief. But the effort is getting to be greater than the relief. Half the time now I am awfully lazy and lie down ever so much. John says I mustn't lose my strength, and it has to take me cod liver oil and lots of tonics and things, to say nothing of able wine and rare meat. Dear John, he loves me very dearly and hates to have me sick. I tried to have a real earnest, reasonable talk with him the other day, and tell him how I wish he would let me go and make a visit to Cousin Henry and Julia. But he said I wasn't able to go, nor able to stand it after I got there. And I did not make out a very good case for myself, for I was crying before I had finished. It is getting to be great efforts for me to think straight. Just this nervous weakness, I suppose. And dear John gathered me up in his arms and just carried me upstairs and laid me on the bed and sat me by and read to me till it tired my head. He said I was his darling and his comfort and all he had, and that I must take care of myself for his sake and keep well. He says no one but myself can help me out of it, that I must use my own will and self-control, and not let any silly fancies run away with me. There's one comfort. The baby is well and happy, and does not have to occupy this nursery with this horrid wallpaper. If we had not used it, that blessed child would have. What a fortunate escape. Why, I wouldn't have a child of mine, an impressionable little thing, living in such a room for worlds. I never thought of it before, but it is lucky that John kept me here after all. I can stand it so much easier than a baby, you see. Of course, I never mentioned it to them any more. I am too wise, but I keep watch of it all the same. There are things in that paper that nobody knows but me or ever will. Behind that outside pattern, the dim shapes get clearer every day. It is always the same shape, only very numerous. And it is like a woman stooping down and creeping about behind that pattern. I don't like it a bit. I wonder. I begin to think. I wish John would take me away from here. It is so hard to talk with John about my case because he is so wise and because he loves me so. But I tried it last night. It was moonlight, The moon shines and all around just as the sun does. I hate to see it sometimes. It creeps so slowly and always comes in by one window or another. John was asleep, and I hated to wake him, so I kept still and watched the moonlight on that undulating wallpaper till I felt creepy. The faint figure behind seemed to shake the pattern just as if she wanted to get out. I got up softly and went to feel and see if the paper did move, and when I came back, John was awake. "What is it, little girl?" I said. "Don't go walking about like that. You'll get cold." I thought it was a good time to talk, so I told him that I really was not gaining here, and that I wish he would take me away. "Why, darling," he said, "our lease will be up in 3 weeks, and I can't see how to leave before. The repairs are not done at home, and I cannot possibly leave town just now. Of course, if you were in any danger, I could and would, but you really are better, dear, whether you can see it or not. I'm a doctor, dear, and I know you're gaining flesh and color. Your appetite is better. I feel really much easier about you." "I don't weigh a bit more, and I nor as much, and my appetite may be better in the evening when you are here, but it is worse in the morning when you are away." "Oh, bless her little heart," said he with a big hug. She shall be as sick as she pleases. But now let's improve the shining hours by going to sleep and talk about it in the morning." "And you won't go away?" I asked gloomily. "Why, how can I, dear? It is only 3 weeks more, and then we will take a nice little trip of a few days while Jenny is getting the house ready. Really, dear, you are better." "Better in body, perhaps," I began, and stopped short, for he sat up straight and looked at me with such a stern, reproachful look that I could not say another word. "My darling," he said, "I beg you, for my sake and your child's sake, as well as for your own, that you will never for one instant let the idea enter your mind. There is nothing so dangerous, so fascinating to temperament like yours. It is a false and foolish fancy. Can you not trust me as a physician when I tell you so?" So, of course, I said no more on that score. And we went to sleep before long. He thought I was asleep first, but I wasn't, and I lay there for hours trying to decide whether that front pattern and the pattern in the back really did move together or separate. On a pattern like this, by daylight, there is lack of sequence, a defiance of law that is a constant irritant to a normal mind. The color is hideous enough and unreliable enough and infuriating enough, but the pattern is torturing. You think you must master it, but just as you get well underway in following, it turns a back somersault, and there you are. It slaps you in the face, knocks you down, and tramples upon you. It is like a bad dream. The outside pattern is a florid arabesque, reminding one of a fungus. If you can imagine a toadstool in joints, an interminable string of toads, budding and sprouting in endless convolutions, why, that is something like that. That is, sometimes there is one marked peculiarity about this paper, a thing nobody seems to notice but myself, and that is that it changes as the light changes. when the sun shoots in through the east window, I always watch for that first long, straight ray. It changes so quickly, I can never quite believe it. That is why I watch it away. By moonlight, the moon shines in all night. When there is a moon, I would know it was the same paper. At night, in any a kind of light, in twilight, candlelight, lamplight, and worst of all, by moonlight, it becomes bars. The outside pattern, I mean, and the woman behind it is as plain as can be. I did not realize for a long time what that thing was that showed behind, that dim sub-pattern, but now I am quite sure it is a woman. By daylight she is subdued, quiet. I fancy it is the pattern that keeps her so still. It is so puzzling, it keeps me quiet by the hour. I lie down ever so much now. John said it is good for me, and to sleep all I can. Indeed, he started the habit by making me lie down for an hour after each meal. It's a very bad habit. I am convinced. For you see, I don't sleep. And that cultivates deceit, for I don't tell them I'm awake. Oh no. The fact is, I'm getting a little afraid of John. He seems very queer sometimes, and even Jenny has an inexplicable look. It strikes me occasionally, just as a scientific hypothesis, that perhaps it is the paper. I've watched John when he did not know I was looking and come into the room suddenly on the most innocent excuses, and I've caught him several times looking at the paper. And Jenny too. I caught Jenny with her hand on it once. She didn't know I was in the room, and when I asked her in a very quiet voice, the most restrained manner possible, what she was doing with the paper, she turned around as if she had been caught stealing and looked quite angry. Asked me why I should frighten her so. Then she said that the paper stained everything touched, that she had found yellow smooches on all of my clothes and John's, and she wished we would be more careful. Did not this sound innocent? But I know she was studying that pattern, and I am determined that nobody shall find it out but myself. Life is very much exciting now that I'm used to be than it used to be. You see, I have something more to expect, to look forward to watch. I really do eat better, and I am more quiet than I was. John is so pleased to see me improve. He laughed a little the other day and said I seemed to be flourishing in spite of my wallpaper. I turned it off with a laugh. I had no intention of telling him it was because of the wallpaper. He would make fun of me. He might even want to take me away. She didn't know I was in the room. I don't want to leave now until I have found it out. There is a week more, and I think that will be enough. I'm feeling ever so much better. I don't sleep much at all at night, for it is so interesting to watch developments, but I see a good deal in the daytime. In the daytime, it is tiresome and perplexing. There are always new shoots on the fungus and new shades of yellow all over it. I cannot keep count of them, though I have tried consciously. It is the strangest yellow, that wallpaper. It makes me think of all the yellow things I've ever saw. Not beautiful ones like buttercups, but old, foul, bad yellow things. But there is something else about paper. The smell. moment we came into the room. But with so much air and sun, it was not bad. Now we've had a week of fog and rain, and whether the windows are open or not, the smell is here. It creeps all over the house. I find it hovering in the dining room, skulking in the parlor, hiding in the hall, lying in wait for me on the stairs. It gets into my hair. Even when I go to ride, if I turn my head suddenly and surprise it, there is that smell. Such a peculiar odor, too. I've spent hours trying to analyze it, to find out what it smelled like. It's not bad at first and very gentle, but quite the subtlest, most enduring odor I've ever met. In this damp weather, it is awful. I wake up in the night and find it hanging over me. It used to disturb me at first. I thought seriously of burning the house to reach the smell, but now I'm used to it. The only thing I can think of is that, like the color of the paper, a yellow smell. This is a very funky mark on the wall, low down near the mop board, a streak that runs around the room. It goes behind every piece of furniture except the bed. A long, straight, even smooch, as if it had been rubbed over and over. I wonder how it was done and who did it, and what they did it for. Round and round and round, round and round and round. It makes me dizzy. I really have discovered something at last. Through watching so much at night when it changes so, I have finally found out. The front pattern does move, and no wonder. The woman behind it shakes it. Sometimes I think there are a great many women behind, and sometimes only one. And she crawls around fast, and her crawling shakes it all over. Then in the very bright spots, she keeps still. In the very shaded spots, she just takes hold of the bars and shakes them hard. And she is all the time trying to climb through. But nobody could climb through that pattern. It strangles so. I think that is why it has so many heads. They get through, and then the pattern strangles them off and turns them upside down and makes their eyes white. If those heads were covered or taken off, it would not be half so bad. I think that woman gets out in the daytime, and I'll tell you why. Privately, I've seen her. I can see her out of every one of my windows. It is the same woman, I know, for she is always creeping, and most women do not creep by daylight. I see her on that long road under the trees, creeping along, and when a carriage comes, she hides under the blackberry vines. I don't blame her a bit. It must be very humiliating to be caught creeping by daylight. I always lock the door when I creep by daylight. I can't do it at night, for I know John would suspect something at once. And John is so queer now that I don't want to irritate him. I wish he would take another room. Besides, I don't want anyone to get that woman out at night but myself. I wonder if I could see her out of all the windows at once. But I turn as fast as I can. I can only see out of one at a time. And though I always see her, she may be able to creep faster than I can turn. I have watched her sometimes away, off into the open country, creeping as fast as a cloud shadow in a high wind. little by little, I have found out another funny thing, but I shan't tell it this time. It does not do to trust people too much. There are only 2 more days to get this paper off, and I believe John is beginning to notice. I don't like the look in his eyes, and I heard him ask Jenny a lot of professional questions about me. She had a very good report to give. She said I slept a good deal in the daytime. John knows I don't sleep very well at night. For all I'm so quiet. He asks me about all sorts of questions too, and pretended to be very loving and kind, as if I couldn't see through him. Still, I don't wonder. He acts so sleeping under his paper for 3 months. It only interests me, but I feel sure John and Jenny are secretly affected by it. Hooray, this is the last day, but it is enough. John is to stay in town overnight and won't be out until this evening. Jenny wanted to sleep with me, the sly thing, but I told her I should undoubtedly rest better for a night all alone. That was clever for real, for really I wouldn't be alone. I wasn't alone a bit. As soon as the moon lit and the poor thing began to crawl and shake the pattern, I got up and ran to her. I pulled and she shook, I shook and she pulled. And before morning we had peeled off yards of that paper, a strip about as high as my head and half around the room. And then when the sun came and that awful pattern began to laugh at me, I declared I would finish it today. We go away tomorrow, and they are all moving all my furniture down again to leave things as they were before. Jenny looked at the wall in amazement, but I told her merrily that I did it out of pure spite at the fishes thing. She laughed and said she wouldn't mind doing it herself, but I must not get tired. How she betrayed herself that time. But I am here, and no person touches the paper but me, not alive. She tried to get me out of the room. I was too patent. But I said it was so quiet and empty and clean now that I believed I would lie down again and sleep all I could, and not wake me even for dinner. I would call when I woke. So now she is gone, and the servants are gone, and the things are gone, and there is nothing left but that great bedstead nailed down with the canvas mattress we found on it. We shall sleep downstairs tonight and take the boat home tomorrow. I quite enjoy the room. Now it is bare again. How those children did tear about here. This bedstead is fairly gnawed, but I must get to work. I've locked the door and thrown the key down into the front path. I don't want to go out, and I don't want to have anyone come in till John comes. I want to astonish him. I've got a rope up here that even Jenny did not find. If I want that woman does get out and tries to get away, I can tie her. But I forgot I could not reach far without anything to stand on. This bed will not move. I tried to lift and push it until I was lame, and then I got so angry I bit off a little piece at one corner, but it just hurt my teeth. Then I peeled off all the paper I could reach, standing on the floor. It sticks horribly, and the pattern just enjoys it. All those strangled heads and bulbous eyes and waddling fungus growths just shriek with derision. I'm getting very angry. Enough to do something desperate. To jump out of the window would be admirable exercise, but the bars are too strong even to try. Besides, I wouldn't do it. Of course not. I know well enough that a step like that is improper and might be misconstrued. I don't like to look out of that window even. There are so many of those creeping women, and they creep so fast. I wonder if they all come out of that paper wall as I did. But I am securely fastened now by my well-hidden rope. You don't get me out in the road there. I suppose I shall have to get back behind the pattern when it comes night, and it is hard. It is so pleasant to be out in this great room and creep around as I please. I don't want to go outside. I won't, even if Jenny asks me to. For outside you have to creep on the ground, and everything is green instead of yellow. But here I can creep smoothly on the floor, and my shoulders just fits in that long smooch around the wall, so I cannot lose my way. Why, there's John at the door. It is no use, young man, you can't open it. How he does call and pound. Now he's crying for an axe. It would be a shame to break that beautiful door. Dear John, said I in the gentlest voice, the key is downstairs by the front steps under a plantain leaf. That silenced him for a few moments. Then he said very quietly, "Open the door, my darling." "I can't," I said. "The key is down by the front door under a plantain leaf." And then I said it again several times very gently and slowly, and said it so often that he had to go and see. And he got it, of course, and came in. He stopped short by the door. "What is the matter?" he cried. "For God's sake, what are you doing?" I kept on creeping, just the same, but I looked at him over my shoulder. "I've got out at last," I said, "in spite of you and Jane, and I've pulled off most of the paper so you can't put me back." Now why should that man have fainted? But he did, and ran across my path by the wall so that I had to creep over him every time. The end. The yellow wallpaper. What do you think of this story? I thought it was very interesting and well written.